It is 1 year to the day that BlurXTerminator was released, and it was an astrophotography revolution. And today, BlurXTerminator 2 is released, and it is all over a revolution again. All about it right after the trailer. Hey, this is View into Space. I'm Sascha from Switzerland, so grüezi miteinander and thanks for watching my channel. So BlurXTerminator 2 is not just another release, it is another milestone. And if you think I'm overly excited, wait until you see what it can do. We will split this video in two parts. In the first part, I will show you now in PixInsight what BlurXTerminator 2 can do, because only seeing is believing. In the second part, I will give you all the information, all the tips and tricks that you need to know to get the best out of BlurXTerminator 2, because a lot of things have changed, and the golden rules which apply to BlurXTerminator 1, they have changed a bit. So you need to know that. But before we start, just a few things. First of all, this is breaking news. To never miss such breaking news again, if you have not done it yet, please hit the subscribe button, and you will belong always to the first to know about things like that. Second of all, there will be a PDF just nicely condensing what you need to remember when using BlurXTerminator 2. This will be available on my Patreon channel. Link is also in the description below. And third, what you actually need to do to get BlurXTerminator 2. If you already own BlurXTerminator, it's for free, the update. You only have to click on Update on PixInsight. It will find it, it will download it. The only thing is, once you start it for the first time, you will see that it tells you that a new AI model is available. Just select this new AI model 4, and everything is fine. If you do not own BlurXTerminator yet, it's about time. In the description below, you find my affiliate link. I would very much appreciate if you would use this link to order BlurXTerminator. No additional cost for you, but it helps the channel. With that, let's jump in PixInsight and really look at what changed. So let's look at what BlurXTerminator version 2 can do. So I have here 5 pictures. They're ones without BlurXTerminator, ones with BlurXTerminator version 1, and ones with BlurXTerminator version 2. 4 of these pictures are the worst pictures that I could find in my collection, and 1 is a good picture. So let's start here with an early version of M16. Without BlurXTerminator, you see these stars are blurry. I mean, this is really, really bad. So let's see what BlurXTerminator version 1 could do with that. This is the original. This is BlurXTerminator version 1. Looks much better than before, obviously. Still, there's still a lot of these stripes. It's still eggy. You also see it here. There's some halos around it. So while it's a lot better, it's not great. Another thing I want to show you is here, the pillars of creation. Look especially at this part here. It just gets too dark. Also here. It's just too much contrast. So it's like it's over sharpening it. So now let's take BlurXTerminator version 2 and see what changes now. If you just stick here for a second, you see it actually corrects it nicely again. It's not so much contrast anymore. This looks much more natural. There are much more details in these parts. You also see it up here. It gets a little wider, a little bit larger again, but much closer to what the nebula really looks like. But now let's head down here, where we still have substantial issues with these stars. Wow, you see that? Tuck. We get rid of these double stars. It's just one, how it should be. And most of these traces, they're gone. These stars are practically perfectly round now. So this looks now like a decent picture. And obviously the effect is even more extreme if we look at it now with the original picture. But you see, you don't get these double stars anymore, and it just makes, out of all of this mess, it just makes round stars, full stop. And you also see here with the pillars of creation that it's not like it's doing nothing, it still sharpens it massively, but in a natural way. So now look at the whole picture. You can use this picture without being ashamed. And this is now, just to be clear, this is not stretch. This is just BlurXpert and nothing else. BlurXpert and BXT, full stop. If you would now really stretch it, noise exterminator and so on, this is actually a nice picture. And that's really the crazy part. Now let's come to another beauty, M57. Obviously, it would need massive stretching to get this, to actually really see what it is, but you know what it is. But again, look at these stars. These stars are almost as big as M57, and they're eggy again. Not a nice sight. So what did BlurXTerminator version 1 do with it? From a star point of view, it got them smaller, but even more eggy here. It's okayish, but definitely not good. But the other thing is that you see that it completely failed with M57. It put this dark stuff around it, so it completely messed it up. So BXT version 1 was not applicable for this picture, or it would have messed this up. So what can BXT version 2 do with it? And look at that. Boom. It's absolutely fine here. And again, look at the stars. They look like normal stars, like they should be. There's nothing eggy anymore in this picture. And obviously even more extreme again when we go to the original picture. We started from that and we got to that. So the next picture from my horror gallery is M10. Cluster actually looks not even that bad, but if we go outside again, it's just crazy bad. I mean, look at that here. That's just terrible. By the way, when we talk about terrible, this picture also had a terrible gradient in there. You see a little bit the remains here, but it was really a tough gradient. And BlurXpert AI, just with one button, it just removed it. So just another great application. But let's look now at this here. So BlurXTerminator 1. Definitely a huge improvement, especially if you look at the star cluster. Looks much better. But here in the horror section, no, this is definitely not good. No, couldn't handle the craziness that's going on here. Also, when we go up here, this still looks really bad. So let's look now what BlurXTerminator 2 can do. Let's first of all look at the star cluster, and you see that it just went another generation up from a sharpness point of view, from the star structure that you're seeing, way better. But if you go now here again to the horror section, look at that. This is like, I don't know, half a moon? Star. Here. Star. And even this stuff here, look at that, you cannot even recognize really that this should be stars. It's just some smudges, stars. There are obviously still some stuff in the background that's but absolutely insane. And again, if we look at the whole picture now, look at that. This looks like a nice picture. If you would process that now the right way, this would be good. Now the last one that I have for you is, as promised, a good picture. This is now taken with my FRA 400 with the Avalon M0. Again, the Eagle Nebula. So here we already have decent stars, round stars, a lot of stars. So that might be more the reality for you, I hope, for your sake. So the question is, does BXT2 make a big difference here? Because that might be more relevant to you. And let's look at it now. So we start here again with BXT1. This is still the unchanged one. And this is BlurXTerminator 1. I think we see the stars obviously get smaller, that's clear. I think interesting is when you zoom in here and we see here again these very over sharpened, over contrast structures of the nebula. And let's look now what BlurXTerminator 2 does here. You see that? Much nicer. Not so thin anymore, not so dark anymore. This looks much, much better. If you look at that now in contrast to the original one, then you see that it still does a big change. It sharpens a lot. This is very blurred here, looks very nicely structured here. Also in this area, but it's just more natural than we had before. So I think it does really a more authentic job. Also the stars, if you look, they're not over sharpened, not too small, but they're nice and round. But now I want to show you something really amazing. Have a look at this picture. This is already done with BlurXTerminator 1. So decent job, the stars are all round. But have a look, for example, here. There's this little shadow here too, here too. Now we go to BlurXTerminator 2. See that here? From just a little smudge, we get a little tiny star. Here too it starts to glow. Here too. So as it looks like, we get a lot more stars with BlurXTerminator 2 as we got with BlurXTerminator 1, and not in a bad sense, not that they're invented, but just that it was able to recover them. Here, for example. But obviously that's very subjective. Is it really this way? Or is it just my imagination? And I wanted to be sure. And so let's do now an experiment, and that's with PSF Image Creator. So we first take the BXT1 image, we say evaluate, scanning, and it says it has 502 stars found. Based on that, it will now actually create the PSF. So we have 502 stars, and we have a full width half max of about 2.95, right? Good. Let's keep these numbers in mind. Now we have here BlurXTerminator 2, and we do exactly the same. And we get 1,270 stars. So this is more than double the stars than you had before. And we're now at a full width half max of 2.5. So this is both a huge difference. And this just shows the progress that BXT made. Because otherwise you could have really said, if you do not have such messed up pictures in, like I had, what's the point? What's the difference? But the difference also for a good picture is huge. On one side you get more stars, you get better defined stars, and you get in the nebula a much more realistic depiction of the nebula structure. So it's really, really amazing what Russ has done here. Okay, wow, I hope you're as excited now as I am. This is really amazing. And so I think to summarize this now also on a theoretical level, the points where BlurXTerminator 2 really excels is how it corrects aberrations of any kind. And in principle there's this huge list now of aberration that it corrects, but to sum it up, whatever it is, it corrects it. But that said, Russ still emphasizes that that does not mean that quality of data is not relevant anymore. This truth stays with BlurXTerminator 2. Information that's not available, information which is drowned in noise, cannot be recovered, and BlurXTerminator 2 doesn't make up any data. So gather enough light, get enough integration time, get the noise signal ratio down before you go into PixInsight. The second thing that BlurXTerminator 2 also does substantially better is the star field handling. And I think we have seen that very nicely in the star clusters that I showed you. There is one tip with star clusters, huge star fields. In these cases, please set the non-stellar sharpening to 0. Because otherwise it might actually mistake stars within the cluster as non-stellar structures, and this might lead to unwanted corrections, unwanted effects. But with that in mind, it does an amazing job. Now let's come to the biggest change in how BlurXTerminator 2 works in comparison with BlurXTerminator 1. And that is that BlurXTerminator 1 actually did a preliminary stretch. Then it did this magic, and then it kind of unstretched the picture again. And that is why kind of a linear stretch with a screen transfer function, with histogram transformation, and then doing BXT did work quite well, even it was not recommended. But that all changed now, because BlurXTerminator 2 works directly on the linear picture. No more stretching done. And that is why the times when you could use BXT also on stretched pictures are definitely over. You need to do BXT from now on unstretched pictures. And some of you might now come back and say, well, it still works. It's not that it still works, it's still that it does something, and in some cases it might do something which you perceive as nice or helpful. But it's not deconvolution anymore. It's not really how BlurXTerminator should work and should do its job. So if you have applied BlurXTerminator until now on the nonlinear, on the stretched stage, this will be the biggest change for you. Now let's come to a little bit of complex topic which is quite important, and that is color versus grayscale, black and white. So in principle, BlurXTerminator is trained on color picture, and it can, based on the relationship of the color layers of the color channels, it can derive some information which is helpful, which will make your picture look better. So the general rule is always apply BXT on the combined color picture and not on the individual channels prior to combination. Which obviously again means you need to combine the channels before you do the stretching. Now there are, as always, some exceptions. BXT might have issues if the channels were not acquired from the same optical property. That means if you, for example, shoot certain channels with one telescope and certain channels with another telescope, that might be an issue. If you shoot some channels before the meridian flip and some channels after the meridian flip, that might be an issue, with the emphasis on might. I personally would still use it the standard way, but if you see something is kind of off, you know why. In this case, please apply BXT on each of the channels before combination, but only in a correct only fashion. Then you combine them, and then you let run BXT again. Now BXT is also trained to see some color shifts. For example, you might have realized that halos are, with some setups, prominently blue. To make this correction as effectively as possible, let BXT run with the correction only mode, then run SPCC, and then run BlurXTerminator again, having everything activated. Now when it comes to narrowband shooting, also something has to be considered. We do a lot of crazy stuff with narrowband shooting, SHO, 4x, we change the channel weights, we mix different emissions for one channel, and so on. BlurXTerminator is not so cool with this stuff. He wants one original emission per color per channel. So the way to do it is you just combine the channels per default, SHO for example, then you run BlurXTerminator, and afterwards go crazy and do whatever you want. Last but not least, mosaics. With mosaics, it's quite common to have some optical aberrations in this part where the two panels are joined. There might also be some other mismatches, and this just causes BXT not to work optimally. So the way to go here is, again, for each and every panel, run correct only option first, then put the panels together to the final mosaic, and then you can run BlurXTerminator again over the whole mosaic. Last but not least, something which got simpler. you remember my tip that you should actually use correct first, you should calculate your own PSF, stuff like that. This is not needed anymore based on how BlurXTerminator 2 works. So this correct first option disappeared and you do not have to calculate your own PSF again. So just go with the flow, except of the few things that I just mentioned where you should go with the correct only first. In any other cases, just default, just choose your sharpening options, your halo options, and everything will be fine. As stated, if this is now all a little bit much for you, if you would like to have it condensed in a nice PDF to remember, you find that on my Patreon channel. Link is in the description below. If you have any questions about BXT, anything that's unclear, please leave it in the comments below. I might discuss it with Russ and do a follow-up video where I will answer these questions. Hope this was helpful. See you next time, and clear skies.